The hydraulic wrench in Ronin's hand weighed 12 pounds. After 4 hours of holding it above his head, working on the primary coolant coupling of the iron mule, it felt more like 50. Every turn of the bolt sent a sharp, familiar spike of pain shooting from his right shoulder down to his elbow, a reminder of a shrapnel injury from the siege of Tanis 20 years ago. The medics had told him then that he'd lose mobility by 40. Ronin was 45 now. He still had the mobility. He just had to pay for it with a little grit every morning. He grunted, leaning his entire body weight into the tool. The coupling screeched, a sound of tortured metal that echoed through the cavernous, dimly lit cargo bay, before finally snapping loose. A spray of hot, oily coolant hissed out, splashing against his grease-stained undershirt. Ronin didn't flinch. He just wiped his face with a rag that was arguably dirtier than he was. "You enjoy this," a voice said from the shadows. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. Ronin didn't look up immediately. He finished tightening the bypass valve, checked the pressure gauge, and tapped the glass with a scarred knuckle. Only when the needle settled into the green did he turn around. Elara was sitting on a crate of dehydrated rations near the airlock, looking like a diamond dropped in a mud puddle. She was Aethelguard, high-born, long-lived, and biologically perfect. Her skin was a pale, luminous blue that seemed to hold its own light in the gloom of the ship. Her ears were long and tapered, twitching at every groan of the ship's hull. She wore a silk tunic that was miraculously clean, despite having been pulled from a slaver's cage 3 days ago. "I don't enjoy it, Elara," Ronin rasped, his voice sounding like gravel crunching under boots. "I do it because if I don't, the fusion drive overheats and we turn into a rapidly expanding cloud of radioactive gas. It's called maintenance." Elara stood up, her movements fluid and silent. She looked around the cargo bay with unmasked disdain. She looked at the exposed wiring hanging from the ceiling, the floor grate stained with years of oil and boot polish, the flickering yellow work lights. "In the Aethelguard spire cities," she said, her voice melodic but cold as ice, "machines do not break. They are grown from living crystal. They are perfect, and if they falter, even for a microsecond, they are reabsorbed and replaced." She walked toward him, stopping just outside the reach of his grease-covered hands. "You humans, you cling to broken things," she continued, her violet eyes locking onto the thick white scar that ran down Ronin's jawline. "You patch them with tape and prayers. You live in filth and struggle, and you call it character. It is inefficient, it is primitive." Ronin tossed the wrench onto his workbench. It landed with a heavy, satisfying clang. He grabbed a bottle of water, took a long swig, and looked at her. "Perfection is cheap, Elara," Ronin said quietly. "If something never breaks, you never learn how it works. You never learn what it's made of. If you've ever rebuilt an engine block on a Saturday afternoon, fighting with every rusted bolt, you know the truth. There is a bond you form with things you bleed for. A shiny new car is just a possession. But the truck you kept running for 20 years, that's a partner, that's loyalty. And loyalty is something you can't manufacture." Elara scoffed, turning away from him. She walked toward the far corner of the bay, where a gravity-dampening field was holding their most recent salvage. It was the only reason the slavers hadn't killed Elara immediately. They had found her guarding it. It was a suit of armor, or rather the remains of one, a massive breastplate and a left gauntlet. Dull gray and pitted with the scars of 1,000 years of neglect. It looked like a dead thing, a relic of a forgotten war. "You should not have brought it aboard," Elara whispered, her anger shifting into something else. Fear, reverence, it was hard to tell with her kind. "The slavers were going to melt it down for the raw neutronium," Ronin said, walking over to join her. He wiped his hands on a rag, trying to get the worst of the coolant off. "I figured a collector on the rim worlds might pay enough for it to overhaul my port thrusters." Elara spun on him, her eyes flashing. "Sell it?" she hissed. "You would sell the husk of the Voidwalker? Do you have any concept of what stands before you, human?" "I see a pile of gray metal that weighs a ton and doesn't work," Ronin shrugged. "That pile of metal was forged in the heart of a dying star," Elara said, her voice rising. "It was worn by Kalen the Unbroken, the Aethelguard champion who held the Rift Gate alone against the Void Legion. It is not a machine. It is a symbiotic entity. It possesses a soul." She reached out a trembling hand toward the dull gray metal but stopped inches away, as if afraid it might bite her. "It has been dormant for 3,000 years, she said softly. Since Kalen fell, many have tried to wake it. Princes, generals, high priests. The strongest of my people, the wisest, the most pure. She looked at Ronin with a pitying sneer. It rejected them all. It burned the flesh from their bones for their arrogance. It waits for a spirit of absolute perfection, a timeless soul. Ronin leaned against a support strut, crossing his thick arms. And let me guess, humans need not apply? Humans? Elara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You are mayflies, Ronin. You live for 70, maybe 80 years. You spend your short lives rushing, consuming, fighting over scraps of dirt. You have no patience, no depth. You are biological chaos. She stepped closer to the armor, her back to him. How could a creature that dies so quickly possibly understand the burden of eternity? You are weak because you are temporary. This armor requires a bond that transcends time. A human touching this, it would be like an insect trying to pilot a starship. You would simply burst. Ronin watched her. He didn't get angry. He was too old for that. He'd heard speech like this from Federation officers, from corporate overlords, from enemies who thought their superior tech made them invincible. They all made the same mistake. They confused durability with strength. Maybe you're right, Ronin said, pushing off the strut. Maybe we are temporary. But that's the point, isn't it? He walked up to the armor, standing next to her. He was a head taller than Elara, broad-shouldered and scarred, a stark contrast to her ethereal grace. We don't have forever, Elara, Ronin said, looking at the dull gray metal. So we have to make it count now. We don't wait for perfection. We do the job with what we have. We fight even when we know we're going to lose. Because for us, there isn't a next century to fix it. He looked at her. You call that weakness, I call it motivation. Elara opened her mouth to retort, to crush his primitive philosophy with her ancient wisdom. But the words never came. Because the ship screamed, clang thud. The sound was massive, dull, and reverberated through the deck plates like a hammer striking a bell. The iron mule lurched violently to the starboard side, throwing Elara off balance. She stumbled, and Ronin caught her arm to steady her. What was that? She gasped, her eyes wide. Ronin didn't answer. He was already moving. He pushed her toward the cover of the heavy shipping containers. His eyes were scanning the ceiling, the airlock, the sensor relays. Whoop, whoop, whoop! The crimson emergency light spun to life, bathing the cargo bay in a blood-red wash of rotating shadows. The cheerful hum of the ventilation system died, replaced by the urgent mechanical bark of the proximity alarm. Hull breach, Ronin said, his voice dropping into that calm, flat tone that soldiers use when everything has gone to hell. Airlock 4, they clamped onto us. Who? Elara whispered, clutching her tunic. The slavers? No, Ronin said, moving to the weapon rack on the far wall. He grabbed his heavy kinetic shotgun, a brutal, ugly weapon that fired 8-gauge tungsten slugs. He racked the slide. Chunk. Slavers hail you and ask for a ransom. These guys just magnetized to the hull and blew the locks. This is a hit squad. The heavy blast doors at the main entrance of the bay began to hiss. The center of the metal was turning cherry red. Someone was cutting through. Get behind the crates, Ronin ordered, pointing to the darkest corner of the bay, behind the generator stack. Stay low, cover your ears. Ronin, Elara said, her voice trembling. If they are cutting through durasteel that fast, they have plasma lances. That means they are heavy infantry. You cannot fight them with that projectile toy. Ronin checked the ammo counter. Full. It's not a toy, Ronin muttered. It's a problem solver. He positioned himself behind a heavy workbench, using it as a barricade. He ignored the pain in his shoulder. He ignored the fatigue in his legs. He was 45 years old, he was tired, and he just wanted to finish fixing the coolant leak. But the universe had other plans. The blast door exploded inward. A cloud of superheated vapor and metal shrapnel filled the entrance. Through the smoke, 3 figures stepped into the red-lit bay. They were huge, 7 feet tall, encased in biomechanical power armor that looked like the carapace of a giant beetle. The Krave mercenaries from the hive clusters. They didn't care about money, they cared about biomass. They ate what they killed. Elara let out a stifled scream from her hiding spot. The Krave heard it. Their helmet sensors flared green as they scanned the room. Biomass detected, the lead Krave hissed. Its voice sounded like wet meat being ground in a machine. 1 female Aethelguard high value. 1 human male. Low value waste. Ronin stood up. Hey, he shouted. The 3 monsters turned toward him. You didn't wipe your feet, Ronin deadpanned. He pulled the trigger. Boom! The shotgun roared. a flash of fire in the dark bay. The tungsten slug hit the lead Krave square in the chest. It should have punched a hole through a tank, but against Krave power armor it just sparked. The alien staggered back a step, looking down at the scratch on its chest plate. Then it looked up at Ronin. It laughed, a chittering clicking sound. Primitive, the Krave mocked. It raised its arm. A wrist-mounted plasma cannon whined to life. Move! Ronin shouted to himself, diving to the left. Sizz crack! A bolt of green plasma incinerated the workbench where Ronin had been standing a second ago. Molten metal sprayed across the room. The heat was intense, singeing the hair on Ronin's arms as he rolled across the floor. He came up on one knee and fired again. Boom, boom. 2 shots to the Krave's knee joint. The armor held, the Krave didn't even slow down. The second Krave charged. It moved with terrifying speed for something so large. Ronin tried to bring the shotgun around, but a massive armored backhand caught him across the chest. The impact felt like being hit by a truck. Ronin flew backward, airborne for a second, before crashing into the metal lockers on the far wall. He felt ribs snap, the shotgun skittered away across the deck out of reach. He hit the floor hard, tasting copper. His vision swam. He tried to breathe, but his chest felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. "Ronin!" Elara screamed. The Krave ignored him now. He was broken, a discard. The lead Krave turned its attention to the crates where Elara was hiding. It walked slowly, savoring the fear. "Highborn meat," the creature hissed, extending a serrated wrist blade. "Sweetest marrow." Ronin dragged himself up to a sitting position. His head was spinning. He watched through one swollen eye as the monsters cornered the girl. He looked at his hands, shaking empty, grease-stained. He looked at his shotgun. Too far. He looked at Elara. She was backed against the wall, right next to the display mount of the ancient gray armor. She was looking at him, her eyes pleading, terrified. "Humans are weak," she had said. "You are temporary." Maybe she was right. He was just a man. He had no superpowers. He had no ancient magic. He just had broken ribs and a wrench. But as he watched the Krave raise its blade to gut the woman he had sworn to protect, something hot and hard solidified in Ronin's chest. It was the stubbornness, the refusal to check out early. The sheer, unadulterated spite of a man who had survived 45 years of a galaxy trying to kill him. "Not today," a voice inside him growled. "Not on my ship." Ronin gritted his teeth, forcing his broken body to move. He lunged, not for the door, not for the gun. He lunged for the gray armor mount next to Elara. "Ronin, no!" Elara cried out as he stumbled toward her, blood dripping from his chin. "Run, save yourself!" The Krave swiped at him, but Ronin ducked an ugly, desperate stumble dodge and crashed into the gravity mount. He collapsed against the dull gray chest plate. His breathing was ragged. He was done. The Krave loomed over both of them, raising its blade for a double execution. Ronin looked at the gray, lifeless metal in front of him. The husk of the Void Walker, the thing that supposedly judged souls. "You want perfection?" Ronin coughed, spitting blood onto the ancient metal. "You want a timeless soul?" He grabbed the left gauntlet with his greasy, scarred human hand. He squeezed it with every ounce of dying strength he had left. "I don't have time for that crap," Ronin snarled at the artifact. "I have a job to do, so either wake up and fight or get out of my way." The Krave brought the blade down. Elara screamed, and then the universe blinked. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure. A sudden massive drop in atmospheric pressure, as if a black hole had opened in the room. The dust on the gray armor vaporized instantly. Under Ronin's hand, the metal didn't just warm up, it ignited. Veins of blinding, molten gold energy erupted from beneath the gray corrosion. The light was so intense it cast sharp black shadows against the back wall. A hum deep and resonant like the throat of a dragon vibrated through the deck plates, shaking the teeth of everyone in the room. The Krave's blade stopped in midair, blocked by a shimmering field of hard light that had erupted from Ronin's shoulder. Elara stopped screaming. Her mouth fell open. She stared at Ronin's hand. The gauntlet was liquefying. It was moving, shifting, sliding over Ronin's scarred knuckles, expanding up his forearm, locking onto his elbow with a sound like a heavy vault door sealing shut. Clang. The chest plate unfolded like an origami flower made of star metal, slamming onto Ronin's chest, fusing with the gauntlet. The pain in his ribs vanished instantly, replaced by a surge of power that felt like he had just been plugged into a fusion reactor. Ronin stood up. He didn't struggle. He didn't wobble. He rose like a mountain. The golden light poured from the armor, illuminating the terrified faces of the Krave. Ronin looked at his hand, now a masterpiece of ancient, glowing engineering. He flexed the fingers. The air crackled with ozone. He turned to the Krave leader. The scar on his face looked even more menacing in the gold light. "You broke my ribs," Ronin said. His voice was different, deeper. It echoed with the authority of 1,000 dead kings. He took a step forward and the deck plate dented under his weight. "Now I'm going to break everything else," Ronin said. The Krave leader hissed, a sound like steam escaping a high-pressure valve. It didn't understand the words, but the intent was clear. The golden light pouring off the human was blinding, radiating a heat that made the air in the cargo bay shimmer. But the Krave were apex predators. They didn't know fear, they only knew hunger and conquest. "Kill the vessel!" the leader shrieked, its mandibles clicking furiously. "Harvest the tech." The 2 remaining Krave warriors didn't hesitate. They were fast, terrifyingly fast for creatures encased in 300 pounds of biochitin. The first one launched itself at Ronin, its wrist-mounted plasma blades igniting with a sickly green hum. It aimed a cross-slash at Ronin's neck, a move designed to sever the head and cauterize the wound in a single motion. Ronin didn't dodge. He didn't have the enhanced reflexes of a genetically modified super soldier. He didn't have the grace of an Etheleri bladed dancer. What he had was 45 years of knowing that when a wrench slips, you brace for the impact. He raised his left arm. The golden gauntlet moved with a speed that defied physics, trailing streaks of light like a comet's tail. Clang. The plasma blade slammed into Ronin's forearm. Any other material in the galaxy would have been sliced in half. But the Aethelguard armor didn't just block the strike, it caught it. The golden energy field flared, wrapping around the green plasma like a hungry animal. Ronin felt a jolt run up his shoulder. Not pain, but pressure. Heavy, immense pressure, like holding up a collapsing ceiling beam. He gritted his teeth. "Is that all you got?" Ronin stepped into the blow. He didn't retreat, he advanced. He grabbed the Krave's wrist with his armored hand. The metal of the gauntlet groaned as the servos engaged, powered by the reactor on his chest. If you've ever tightened a vise until the metal screams, you know the feeling. It's not about speed, it's about leverage. It's about applying force until something gives. Ronin squeezed. Now there was a wet, sickening crunch. The Krave's bio-armor shattered like cheap plastic, followed instantly by the bone beneath it. The alien shrieked, a sound that vibrated in the fillings of Ronin's teeth. It dropped to its knees, thrashing. Ronin didn't relish the violence, he didn't smile. He just did the job. He swung his right fist, his unarmored human fist, into the creature's helmet faceplate. The impact cracked the visor. He hit it again and again, until the creature stopped moving. He shoved the unconscious bulk aside and looked up. The Krave leader and the second warrior were staring at him. The arrogance was gone from their posture. "Impossible," the leader gurgled. "Human biology cannot sustain that output. You should be dead." "I get that a lot," Ronin grunted. He took a step forward, the deck plates vibrating under his boots. The golden light from his chest plate was pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, slow, steady, and dangerous. The second warrior panicked. It raised a heavy kinetic repeater, a weapon meant to take down light vehicles, and opened fire. Thud, 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 depleted uranium slugs hammered into Ronin. They hit his chest, his shoulders, his legs. Elara screamed from her hiding spot behind the crates. "Ronin, the shielding!" Ronin flinched with each impact. He felt them. The armor absorbed the kinetic energy, preventing penetration, but the force still transferred. It felt like being hit in the chest with a sledgehammer over and over again. His old ribs ached, his breath hitched, but he didn't stop. "Pain is just information," Ronin told himself, repeating the mantra of his old drill sergeant. "It tells you you're still alive. It tells you the job isn't done yet." He walked through the hail of gunfire. He tucked his chin, leaned forward like he was walking into a hurricane, and kept moving. The golden veins on the armor glowed brighter with every hit, drinking the kinetic energy, storing it, amplifying it. The Krave's weapon clicked dry. Ronin was 3 feet away. "My turn," Ronin wheezed. He didn't punch this one. He reached out with his open palm, placing the glowing gauntlet directly on the Krave's chest plate. "Vent," Ronin whispered. The armor obeyed. It released all the stored energy from the bullets in a single focused pulse. Boom. The shockwave blew the cargo bay doors off their hinges. The Krave warrior was launched backward as if it had been hit by a train. It flew the entire length of the bay, crashed through a stack of metal shipping containers, and crumpled into a heap of broken chitin and silence. Dust and smoke filled the air. The only sound was the high-pitched whine of the recharging armor and the heavy, ragged breathing of the human inside it. The Krave leader was the only one left. It stood by the airlock, its mandibles twitching. It looked at its fallen squad. It looked at the glowing human who refused to die, and then it looked at the exposed fusion drive coupling Ronin had been repairing earlier. A cruel, desperate intelligence flickered in its insect eyes. "If I cannot have the meat," the Krave hissed, pulling a thermal detonator from its belt, "then I will burn the nest." It lunged for the drive core. "No," Elara cried out, scrambling from cover. If that grenade went off next to the core, the Iron Mule would become a miniature supernova. They would all be vaporized in a nanosecond. Ronin was 20 feet away. He was tired. His human body was screaming in protest. His knees felt like they were filled with broken glass. He couldn't run fast enough. He couldn't reach the monster in time, but he was the captain. And this was his ship. "You don't let bastards wreck your house," a voice roared in his mind. "You protect what's yours." Ronin didn't run. He slammed his armored fist into the floor. "Anchor!" he roared. The Aethelguard armor responded to his will, not his words. It understood the intent. Gold energy shot out from the gauntlet, flowing into the floor grates, merging with the ship's own systems. For a brief second, Ronin became the ship. He felt the engines, he felt the gravity plating. He seized control of the local gravity field in the cargo bay. With a grunt of supreme effort, Ronin ripped his hand upward. Gravity reversed instantly in a localized column directly under the Krave leader. The monster was yanked off the floor, slamming into the ceiling with a bone-shattering crunch. The grenade flew from its hand, tumbling harmlessly through the air. The only sound was the high-pitched whine of the recharging armor and the heavy, ragged breathing of the human inside it. The Krave leader was the only one left. It stood by the airlock, its mandibles twitching. It looked at its fallen squad. It looked at the glowing human who refused to die. And then, it looked at the exposed fusion drive coupling Ronin had been repairing earlier. A cruel, desperate intelligence flickered in its insect eyes. "If I cannot have the meat," the Krave hissed, pulling a thermal detonator from its belt, "then I will burn the nest." It lunged for the drive core. "No!" Elara cried out, scrambling from cover. If that grenade went off next to the core, the Iron Mule would become a miniature supernova. They would all be vaporized in a nanosecond. Ronin was 20 feet away. He was tired. His human body was screaming in protest. His knees felt like they were filled with broken glass. He couldn't run fast enough. He couldn't reach the monster in time. But he was the captain. And this was his ship. "You don't let bastards wreck your house," a voice roared in his mind. "You protect what's yours." Ronin didn't run. He slammed his armored fist into the floor. "Anchor!" he roared. The Aethelguard armor responded to his will, not his words. It understood the intent. Gold energy shot out from the gauntlet, flowing into the floor grates, merging with the ship's own systems. For a brief second, Ronin became the ship. He felt the engines. He felt the gravity plating. He seized control of the local gravity field in the cargo bay. With a grunt of supreme effort, Ronin ripped his hand upward. Gravity reversed instantly in a localized column directly under the Krave leader. The monster was yanked off the floor, slamming into the ceiling with a bone-shattering crunch. The grenade flew from its hand, tumbling harmlessly through the air. Ronin caught the detonator with his free hand as it fell. He didn't hesitate. He reared back and threw it through the open breach in the hull, out into the cold vacuum of space. 3 seconds later, a silent white flash illuminated the starfield outside. The Krave leader dropped from the ceiling as Ronin released the gravity hold. It landed hard, broken and wheezing at Ronin's feet. Ronin looked down at the creature. The golden light of the armor was fading now, settling into a warm amber hum. "Get off my ship," Ronin said softly. He grabbed the Krave by its collar and dragged it to the airlock breach. With a final heave, he tossed the broken mercenary out into the void to join its grenade. He hit the emergency seal button. The blast doors slammed shut, cutting off the view of the stars. The hiss of escaping air stopped. Silence returned to the Iron Mule. Ronin stood there for a long moment, leaning against the bulkhead. He felt heavy. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving him shaking and exhausted. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the dirty floor, his armored legs stretched out in front of him. "Computer," he croaked. "Damage report." "Structural integrity holding," the synthetic voice replied. "Minor hull breach sealed. Fusion drive stable." Ronin closed his eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. "Good girl." A shadow fell over him. He opened his eyes to see Elara standing there. She wasn't looking at the damage. She wasn't looking at the gore on the floor. She was looking at him. Her violet eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears. Her hands were clasped over her mouth. She looked at the dull gray armor that was now fused to his body. a mix of ancient silver elegance and gritty human practicality. She slowly sank to her knees in front of him, ignoring the oil and blood on the floor that would stain her silk tunic. "You?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved us. You saved the ship." "That's the job, kid," Ronin grunted, trying to sit up straighter and wincing. Elara reached out, her fingers hovering over the glowing chest plate. The gravity anchor, the kinetic absorption, those are master-level techniques. It takes Aethelguard warriors decades of meditation to unlock them. You use them like they were tools. "They are tools," Ronin said, looking at the gauntlet, "just heavier ones. You don't need meditation to know how to use a hammer, Elara. You just need to know where to hit." Elara shook her head, a look of profound shame crossing her beautiful features. She looked down at her hands. "I called you weak," she said softly. "I called you temporary. I said you were dust." She looked up, meeting his tired gray eyes. "I was wrong. I looked at your flesh and saw only mortality. I did not see the fire that burns beneath it. The armor, it did not choose you because you are perfect, Ronin. It chose you because you are relentless." She reached out and placed her hand on his armored shoulder. The metal hummed, a soft, welcoming sound. It recognized her bloodline, but it belonged to him now. "The Aethelguard has found its guardian," she whispered. "And he is human." Ronin felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, and it wasn't from the fusion reactor. It was the feeling of respect. Genuine, earned respect from someone who had looked down on him an hour ago. It's a quiet thing, realized only after the noise stops. When someone finally sees you, not for what you have or who your parents were, but for what you did when the chips were down. That look in her eyes? That's worth more than all the credits in the galaxy. "Look," Ronin said, his voice gruff to hide his embarrassment. "Don't start building a shrine, okay? I'm just a guy who hates bullies." He groaned as he forced himself to stand up. The armor whirred, the servos assisting his tired muscles. He offered his unarmored hand to Elara. She took it instantly, her grip was firm. "So," Ronin said, looking around the wrecked cargo bay, "we've got 3 dead bugs to clean up, a hull breach to weld, and I still haven't fixed that coolant leak." Elara smiled. It wasn't the polite, icy smile of a princess. It was the tired, relieved smile of a survivor. She rolled up the sleeves of her silk tunic, exposing her pale blue arms. "I will help with the cleaning," she said. "But you are teaching me how to use that wrench." Ronin chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "Careful, princess, you might get your hands dirty." "I think," Elara said, looking at the grease on Ronin's face with a new appreciation, "that dirt is simply the mark of something being useful." Ronin grinned. He looked down at the armor. He tried to mentally command it to deactivate. The helmet, which he hadn't even realized had formed, retracted, and the bulk of the armor shifted, compressing into a sleek, hardened skin over his arm and torso. But it didn't fall off. It stayed there, warm, heavy, permanent. It wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he. "All right then," Ronin said, clapping his hands together. "First things first, coffee. Then we fix the ship. Then we figure out who sent these guys and we pay them a visit." Elara's eyes lit up with a dangerous spark. "A visit?" Ronin turned toward the bridge, the metal of his new armor clinking softly against his old tools. "Yeah," he said over his shoulder. "They broke my door. It's only polite to return the favor." As they walked out of the cargo bay together, the scarred human mechanic and the alien princess, the iron mule hummed around them. It wasn't just a rust bucket anymore. It was the chariot of a new kind of legend. And out in the deep dark, the stars didn't look so cold anymore.